So when there is a lack of trust, invariably is a lack of trust of the mind, not trusting the emotions to behave, to be controlled, to suppress, to not express its spontaneous, energetic, whatever it is.
Hello, everybody. Well, we're here with Sal, and I'm here with Sal on his channel as well. Hiya, Sal. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you very much. And you?
I'm absolutely super duper. I'm top of the pops, thank you. Yeah, we've had a lot of feedback from the conversations we've had before. People have liked the conversations from the comments that people send in. So we thought we could continue the conversation, yeah?
Yeah.
So there was a theme that you suggested that we would chat about, Sal, today.
Sure. Trust. Self-trust. Essentially self-trust. Do we trust ourselves? And this has come about because I wrote an article a few weeks back, and some of my group they said how much they appreciate it, because they really within themselves they resonated with this lack of self-trust, and I thought it'd be great to use this as a starting point, as to what are we as human beings, what is our nature, what are we made of, how do we function? Because if we truly want to understand what happens within us, then we need to know what the machine is. I mean, it's like a car, If you want to use a car, you've got to have some idea how the bloody thing works.
Very true.
Although in these days it's more like computers, but who knows how computers
That's true.
work?
Yeah. You need to be an IT technician rather than a mechanical technician.
Yeah. However, so, I mean, shall I start the ball rolling?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, I'm aware you've got a lot of experience to do with your hypnotherapy on the subject. From my perspective, as human beings, we have three centers. So we've got a physical center, we have an emotional center, and we have a mental center. And for a human being to have congruity of experience, all three of them need to be operating. Unfortunately, that is not the truth. That is not true for most people. Most people will have two centers operating, and the third one comes in now and then, and it's not necessarily fixed. I mean, they can alternate, but invariably there is two working and one is in the background. And when that happens, what we have is the ability to acquire knowledge. But to acquire understanding, all three centers need to be operating. Yeah. Now, from the point of view of, do we trust ourselves? That implies there's a schism within our psyche, and that is invariably between the mind, which is rules, regulations, indoctrination, belief systems, and the emotions. That is the essential dichotomy. The body doesn't get much of a look in. The body is the field on which the wars are waged. So the mind and the emotions fight, and the body is the one that suffers. Yeah. And within the mind itself, there can be competing personality fragments, which want different things, depending on different belief systems. And so when there is a lack of trust, invariably is a lack of trust of the mind, not trusting the emotions to behave, to be controlled, to suppress, to not express its spontaneous, energetic, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
To sort of let you.
Okay, yeah. Well, there's something I wanted just to ask you, because you mentioned when I'm talking about holistic healing, if we talked about that, the word holistic is whole, it's everything involved. I talk about the 4 spheres, which are physical, emotional, mental, and then spiritual as well, because I feel that part, although quite often it's overlooked, also has an impact on us. Yeah. And what I've found is, it's interesting. You're talking about trust and us always trying to repress the emotional body, with mental thought. And we're taught to do that. It's an indoctrination from when we're, stop crying, big boys don't cry, cry baby. So we're given this message that emotional outbursts are not good. In fact, we are very embarrassed when we're confronted by an emotional outburst, or when we have an emotional outburst. Endless people I've heard say, I don't like to cry in public. So it's kind of like, emotions are bad, and mental is good. Just keep it up, keep your head in place, get your head on properly. Loads of expressions we have about, I've got my head in the right place. The thing that I see, though, is the truth of the matter is that no matter how strong your mind, no matter how strong, emotions will always override the mind when it comes to anything that really isn't good for you. So addictions, and so what happens with addictions, and I've kind of analyzed the process that we go through when we know that we're going to do something and we shouldn't do it. Of course, the mind's saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. It's not right. But we just go through this very simplistic process of, we imagine ourselves doing it, and we get this incredible feeling of satisfaction, a feeling of whatever, this emotion that comes waving, and that's it. It's a done deal. What I found with people who smoke and drink, and myself as an ex-drinker, I know this process. Once you've seen yourself do it, it's a done deal. It's too late, because of the emotion that's involved with it. The emotion is so powerful. So I'm kind of going off track a little bit, but
no, not at all.
In that, I understand why people don't always trust their emotions, because sometimes their emotions get them into trouble. They can lead them down a path.
It's a little bit more complex than that, insofar as emotions are neither good nor bad. Emotions are the energy of the body, just hormonal, chemical. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When we repress emotions, they gradually build up. The classical one is the difference between anger and rage. So anger is a very healthy emotion, whereby we defend our space, our integrity. And if you look at animals when they fight in a group, two of them will fight, and very quickly one of them will give up. The one that gives up, they give up before any serious damage happens, hopefully often. But why does one give up and the other one not? What is the difference? One of them is determined to fight to the death, and the other one says, yeah, okay, no, this is too expensive for me, and skulks away. And this is something which is suppressed in our culture. A lion, you wouldn't dare sort of kick a lion. I mean, you just wouldn't, right? You just wouldn't do it.
Oh.
You treat the lion with a lot of respect because you're aware that it's got fangs and that it's powerful. And so you are respectful.
Sure.
So that is anger. That response, the response to anyone pushing against my limits, my boundaries. Whoa, the other person goes, okay, I won't go there. But what we tend to experience is bullying. I mean, I was bullied terribly when I was young. My wife was bullied. A lot of people I've met were bullied. And when we've pushed the bully, when we've gone back to the bully and stood our ground, the bully retreats. Sure. Because it was all a false thing. So anger is that energy of, this is me, I don't take no shit from anybody. But you got to have claws to defend yourself. You got to have claws. It's very difficult to defend yourself if you're a weakling who's never lifted a weight. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're just going to end up crumpled in the ground. So, and if you look at animals, all the animals, what do when they're babies? They play fight.
Sure.
They all do it. Any animal, especially predator animals, they all play fight from the word go. And we are predators, like it or not. We may not like the idea of it, but we are predators. And so it used to happen in the early, you go back to the Romans or whatever, all the men would play fight. They would grow up fighting. Okay. So you end up with a healthy sense of boundary of your anger. In the modern world, this is suppressed unless you then go and train in martial arts, for example, or some sort of fighting. And so the individual doesn't have that inner resource of standing up for oneself. Essentially, we're taught to be weaklings. Mm. So when you are weakling, you suppress your anger. And when you suppress your anger, eventually rage comes out. Whereas anger is very controlled. Anger is not hot. Anger is cold. Anger is like a solid dedication of, I'm going for you, and I'll keep going till the end because I'm not putting up with this. It's a solid energy. Everybody knows, and when you see someone who's angry, you back off.
Sure.
You back off. When you see someone who is enraged, you move out of the way because they're a bull in a china shop and they're directionless. They're just exploding left, right, and center. So you don't respect the person who is enraged. You may be wary of them and keep out of their way, but only because they're a loose cannon. Mm-hmm. So that is essentially the difference. Mm-hmm. So most of us, it was certainly true for me when I was a young lad, we're weak in ourselves and we don't stand up for ourselves. We don't define our limits, our boundaries. So it gets suppressed, And then someone comes out of the sideline who has got nothing to do with it because someone else has upset us and we've shut up. We haven't stood our ground. And then someone else comes and whoa, and they get it in their neck and it's got nothing to do with the other person. Sure. It's unfair. The whole thing is unfair. is an unfair reactions.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'd like to just expand on a few things that you said, which are really interesting. In the work that I do, I would say, let's have a look, at least the first half of this time that I spend with people, the first half of the period they're with me, is to help them to release repressed emotions. It's the first in the healing journey that I help people along. That's the first step. We've got to get to base. We've got to get to a point where all of these repressed emotions are released, and boy, when they come out, boy, you can tell they've been there for a long time. But once they're out, then the job is, like you were saying, is to actually start celebrating the emotions that we have. Because the emotions that we have been given to us, God-given, if you want to call them that, because they all have a job. Every emotion has a job. Just as you were saying with anger, there was a course I did which was just talking about emotions, and every emotion has a job. Anger is the putting right of wrongs. That's what anger's there for. It's to, this is not correct. I am going to sort it. Just like you were saying, the shit stops here. And so when we understand that, then we're not scared of expressing anger. But the job of an emotion is this: the ideal, balanced is you feel it, you express it, and then it's done. Feel, express, done. And it's the same, with people talk about being guilty. Guilt. The job of guilt is actually for you to put right the wrong that you created, whether that be apologizing, doing something, taking action. But lots of people repress that guilt and it eats them up. And that's the other thing with repression of emotion, especially these big, heavy ones like anger and guilt and sadness. They're eating you up on the inside, and they create illness and in lots of different ways, physical, on all of those areas that you've talked about, on the physical level, on the mental level, on the emotional level, and also on the spiritual level as well, that can create illness. So the other point that I wanted to make was just about, you were talking about bullying and repressing the anger of being bullied. And then, there's an expression, just remember, when you're angry, you are not angry for the reason you think you're angry. It's kind of that, that there's something else there that's making you this rage or whatever. But what I've found on with trauma, and it's a bit cliche and it's a bit overused these days. Trauma, I'm traumatized, and really, they've just had they've had a bad day. That's not being traumatized. But trauma is brought about by being in a position where you feel powerless and you think that there's no escape. And if you think about bullying, for example, that's exactly where you are. You're powerless and there's no escape. That's a perception. It's not the truth. It's a perception. Sure. In those moments, then we become traumatized by that. And that obviously, you need to do something to release that trauma, but it becomes trapped. And so I think that there are two things that have to go on for us to find balance. First of all, we need to clean out this trauma, these repressed emotions. And from that point, then we need to look at our life and say, what needs to change? But lots of people are trying to change their life before they've got the foundation sorted out. And so they're going the wrong directions because they feel, this is definitely where I need to be. Whereas if they came from a place of balance, then they would probably choose a different path. What do you think?
Well, I think that's really interesting. And I'd like to add to that, in that the nature of a human being, what is a human being? We take for granted what we are. What we don't realize is that part of me that wants this or wants that, I want to change this or I want to change that. well, who is it that wants to change? It's just a part of my personality. So my personality wants to change itself. What with? Oh, with my personality. You're not going to win. You're not going to win on that one. We can see that we are unhappy in our world and say, I need to change. And so we assume that we can change by focusing on this is how I want to change. But that is ego trying to change ego to be more ego in a different way. And it doesn't quite work. At the end of it is precisely what you said, that we have to release our traumas. And we don't, we think we have free will as human beings, but we don't have free will. We're machines. We're physical machines, we're emotional machines, we're mental machines. Within the vehicle, there is no free will. A car doesn't have free will. A car is a machine. And the ego is a machine. We think we have free will, but it's simply conditioning, whether it's physical conditional, emotional, or mental conditioning, but it's all conditioning. We don't choose. We think we choose, and we've deluded ourselves that somehow we have choice in the world. We have no choice. There is no choice. Humanity does not have a choice. This is why astrology works. Astrology can tell you about yourself. How is that possible? The planets can somehow tell me about my ego, because that's what planets do. They tell us about our ego. And so the movement of the planet somehow translates into relationship events and ways of perceiving and ways of being in the world and things happening to me in the world. How is that even possible? Because we exist in a mechanistic universe. Everything is mechanistic, everything. We all affect each other. No one exists in isolation. Everything has an effect on everything else. The planets have an effect on us. And all of that is about our ego, our personality. So if there is no free will within a human being, is there free will anywhere? Yes, there is. But it doesn't reside with the machine. It doesn't reside. It resides with the passenger of the machine. Whoever gets into the machine is the one who says, this is where I'm going to go. So we want to change ourselves, but really what we're trying to do is we're trying to heal ourselves from all the traumas. When people want to change, is because the world they're in is a painful world and they want to be somewhere better. And that is how it should be. We should be motivated to release whatever's holding us back from being creative, flexible, artistic, all the good things about being a human being. But all of that, the true process of development of a human being is to acknowledge, to connect with the passenger within, which is the soul fragment. And it's the soul fragment that will motivate us in the right direction and communicate with us as to we need to experience within any particular lifetime. But to get there, to get to that place, we need the physical, the emotional, and the mental to be working together. Because if the three are not working, then we are disconnected from the depths of ourselves, because the depths of ourselves are only available when we clear the decks of all the confusion that exists between the mind and the emotions. And then, of course, the physical body that suffers because we've damaged it, and then we're not functioning properly, and communication between all the various pieces not working properly, and we're in pain, and so on and so forth. So we need to have a healthy body, a healthy mind, healthy emotion for this soul to express itself fully. And unfortunately, we seem to have lost the baby with the bathwater through technological advancements. We've become atheistic, and in our atheism, is that the right word? In our atheism,
yeah.
we've lost the connection with the divinity within each of us. And we think we're just a machine. We think, oh, we're just machines, and life and death doesn't matter. And, we can just be here and have no morality and do whatever it is, because nothing matters. Everything matters. Everything matters. And so trust, coming back to the initial bit of trust, to trust ourselves is literally to work through our traumas so that we can reconnect all three centers, so that we can then make space for the soul within us to come forth through feeling. We spoke about this last time, the difference between emotion and feeling. And feeling is not of this world. Feeling is of the soul. It's when we feel, when we truly feel, when we empathize, when we are truly compassionate, when we are experiencing joy, real joy, all of that comes from the soul. And that's what we aim for. Ideally, that's what we should aim for. And when we get there, then the issue of trust disappears.
Sure.
Because what we trust, the ultimate barometer of trust is to trust is thy will be done. It is when we trust God's will, soul will, call it what you will, but that's something beyond this dimension, this physical dimension that operates through every single physical human being, animal, whatever, everything has it. But we as conscious human beings, and some animals, some fish, not fish, but dolphins, there is a conscious expression of the soul dimension. Sorry, I've gone into a pulpit there.
Poetry. Oh yeah, there are lots of things I'd like to unpack there.
Go for it.
So, and this is not in the order that you talked about. I made a few notes as you were talking. So, you were talking about free will, and this is something that I've thought a lot about and pondered a lot about, and been disappointed with sometimes. To say, well, if I can have my chart done by an astrologer and they can tell me the kind of this true story, they can tell me that I was going to be born into a fundamentalist religious family, that I was going to have these challenges, etc., etc. And then I can go and see a medium who will tell me various things that are going to come. If they're good, which I have been to one that was fantastic, I laid out my entire life. And so you say, where's the free will in that? Then wait a minute, what we're talking about here? And so in my communications with my guides, I've asked this question about what's the point? What would be the point then if we're here, but we actually don't, our path is already laid out. The path's already laid out. And this is a message that I get so often. The path is laid out. The path's laid out. But what they've explained, and I think it's the difference between fate and destiny. It's this, and it's interesting because in Spanish there's only one word. They don't have two words, el destino. No, but anyway, here they've got fate. What they explained to me, the way I understand it, is this: the path is fixed. The beginning, the middle, the end, it's all fixed. There's nothing that we can do to change it. However, if we are the vehicle, we have the choice of how we choose to drive down that path, how we choose to negotiate the curves, how we choose how fast we choose to go, when we choose to brake, etc. That is our destiny, I suppose. And so we have control within the process, but we can't leave the process. The process is fixed. But we can, as somebody who did astrology charts was saying, the chart shows you the path. That's all. You've got to choose how you go down that path. So I think that's where the free will idea. This is a free will planet, which is you can do what you like while you're here, but nothing's going to change the ending. It's fixed. There was something else that you mentioned. Go on.
Well, the vehicle is more like a Tesla. Okay.
Right.
I mean, like you think,
well,
the Tesla's got an onboard computer, right? And modern Teslas, they can drive themselves, and they can go faster and slower and turn whatever, all subject to the conditions of the road and the environment. So, although we think we have free will, we are like the Tesla. We have already inbuilt programs that dictate how we will respond in any particular given moment. That doesn't give you free will. It just gives you the appearance of free will. There's a difference.
Oh, sure. It's an appearance of free will because the thing, you see, that the way that I understand it is this: the free will occurs before we come here. Our free will is exercised before we come here. When we sign the contract, when we choose the exact moment to come in, the stars are aligned at that exact purpose so that we fulfill this exact experience. That's where the free will is. Once we're here, we're on the track. It's like a scale electric. We're on the track.
I think we need
the choice that we make happens before. Say again?
I think we need to clarify a little bit more here, because you see, this is the difficulty. When we have the three brains operating, we have self-awareness. If you've only got the two brains operating, there's no self-awareness. You just blindly, blah, blah, blah. But with all three brains, you somehow, we can now see ourselves in motion. We're here, and this gives us a false sense of existence. The fact that we can observe ourselves does not give us free will, and it does not mean that we exist beyond this lifetime. It is the soul within us which joins within the human body at 4 months in the fetus. So at 4 months, the soul blends with the baby inside, and it's there now till death do us part. It's all about soul experiencing. It's not about us experiencing. The problem arises because the soul comes into this body which is surviving in a very damaging environment. In previous times, when there weren't so many psychopaths in the world, in fact, there were hardly none, relatively speaking, the adults, the children would be born, and they would be helped for that soul to be in full control of that body and experience life to the full. And yes, sure, there's always issues, problems, whatever, but there was a connection from the soul to the body. There was an integration which allowed the soul to engage in the world in a way which is missing today. Mm-hmm. Today, the child is born into damaged parents, into a damaged society, into a damaged culture. And the child is not taught to grow within its gifts, the gifts of the human body. The human body's got a lot of gifts. But unless you learn how to use it, a bike is no good if you can't, if you cannot operate it. You've got to get into the bike and drive it. And sure. The human body is so damaged so quickly that the soul doesn't get a look in. And so the challenge is for us to deal with all these suppressed emotions, to really reconnect all the three centers, and then say, okay, take over. Allow the soul to dictate where we go. Mm. This doesn't happen for a lot of people because the connection between the passenger and the vehicle is tenuous. Mm. And so the messages don't get through. And so this is the challenge. So the challenge of the soul is to somehow be in a human body and learn how to drive it, how to navigate it. Mm. It doesn't get a look in for a lot of people. And life is not about us. Life is about the soul experiencing life. Life is literally about let thy will be done. But to get to that point of let thy will be done, we need to integrate the three centers so that our ego can say, okay, I give in, I'm nothing. I'm literally nothing. I acknowledge this. I'm here to be a vehicle to fulfill. So when you speak about destiny, in a way, destiny really is about that. Okay, let thy will be done. I will be guided by my gut feelings, that sort of deep sense within me that will take me wherever I need to go, which everybody gets at little moments here and there. Often they don't listen to it, but nevertheless, we get those promptings to guide us where we need to go. Mm-hmm. Can I just add one more bit on this?
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm hogging. It's to do with time, the nature of time. To understand time in a way, we need to understand that only God, whatever God means, beyond creation is whole. Within creation, everything, absolutely everything is fractured. Even soul is fractured into multiple souls. It's only one soul, but it's fractured. Humanity is fractured. Within ourselves, we're fractured. I mean, I'm not just me, Sal, the ego, but I've got all manner of organs, and I've got 1,000 billion lives inside of me, all somehow coming together to create me. And it's the same with everybody and everything in the universe, yeah? So everything is fractured. And I think I've lost the plot on this time. So at the moment, we experience time in a fractured way. But time is not fractured. Time is one. But we experience time in a fractured dimension. So previous lifetimes, they're all part of the one moment of time. However, we are here at this moment. And so up till now, everything from our perspective, everything that's gone on before has solidified. It's been created. That's it. It's done, over, dusted. What is to come has not happened. it's potential. So even when you look at astrology, yes, the planets dictate the events they're going to happen. That is your fate. You can't avoid it. However, there is always black swans. And we exist in a hugely complex universe. We cannot predict the movement of every single atom in the universe. And so, although at the soul dimension before we're born, we are going to come into the world and with a view of, okay, we're going to work through this and we're going to get there and we'll meet certain people and they will help us and we'll meet others and we will help them. And we have a name, we have a goal of where we're aiming to go. But that's the potential. But human life is really fast. A fly or an ant compared to us, their lifetime is nothing. Yeah. Our lifetime compared to the earth is nothing. Yeah. So it's all relative, but within us. So in terms of the movement of the planets, time takes a long time. Within ourselves, within the movement of human beings interacting with each other, life's really fast. And there's so many potential movements soul cannot predict every single maneuver. So what soul does is it arranges things potentially. In fact, according to Charlie, my source, soul arranges things 8,500 years in advance. So what we're experiencing now has already been planned 8,500 years in the past. And that is no guarantee that it will happen exactly, because we move so fast, so many interactions happened, that the person we're supposed to meet, the connection we're supposed to make, the book we're supposed to read, the idea that's supposed to come our way, so that we will continue growing and we will continue dealing with our traumas and making more and more room for soul to express itself. It's not guaranteed to the nth degree. It is meant to happen. Potentially it will happen, but not necessarily in the way we expect it to happen when it's meant to happen. So there's a level of uncertainty in the universe, because nothing can be guaranteed, but only because we cannot take into account every single molecule that exists in the universe as to which way it's going to move, because something else could walk into it and get destabilized. They talk about the butterfly flaps its wing on the others in Japan, and we get a thunderstorm over here or whatever. So it's that symbolism.
Yeah. I mean, the whole question of time and what time is, etc. I mean, what you've referred to is very, very similar to what, you know, the emissaries one day just said, and by the way, just remember that time doesn't exist. You know, it was like, we'll just plunk that in. Time doesn't exist. Because when I would say to them, can you give me some time frames? They would say no, because we don't have access to that. Anyway, time doesn't exist. So it's like, it does here, and it feels like a bloody long time that we've been waiting for stuff, you know? A couple of things I wanted to talk about that you mentioned about this journey that we're on, and about the soul journey, and I agree with you. This is just the vehicle. Gordon Smith Durán is just the vehicle. You know, whatever we think we are, we're so much more than that. And as you say, you know, we're just sparks of God. But the journey that we're on is this soul journey of I suppose we choose the lessons that we want to learn, these particular lessons. We want to have these experiences as a soul by way of the vehicle. And one thing I see And if you're lucky, you can do it early. And if you're not lucky, you do it later on. But I think we've all got to do it at some point, is to know, to find out what our purpose is, what it is that we're here to do. Why did we choose to come here? And it's more that, rather than why were we put here, which puts us into a victim mode. I was put here. The question is, why did we choose to be here right now in these days? Why did we come here specifically now? And so I work with people to help them to find out the purpose. And the purpose is a very simplistic sentence, which is just, I am a describing word and then a doing word, like a noun. It's a naming word, but it comes from a doing word, like I'm a happy worker. That's what our purpose is. It's very, very generic. It's not very specific when you chunk down to it. But what happens is when you find out what your purpose is, and you reflect on your life, you go, oh yeah, now I see. Every time that I was in my bliss, and I think this is these feelings that you were talking about, this joy, this being. When we're in our bliss, the reason that we're in our bliss is because we're fulfilling fully our purpose. And therefore, there's nothing else to feel except divinity, I suppose. We become the creator that we are. And there's this really interesting process that I'm running a course in November, and it's about self-forgiveness, because as you were talking about, we need that. We need to forgive ourselves so that we can move forward. And one of the processes that we're going to do is where we start through physical anchoring. We look at the difference between I, me, and self. It's interesting that you've been talking about 3, and I'm aware, 3 is a very important number. I, me, and self, they're very, very different parts of ourselves. Because when we talk about it, we say, I am a teacher. And the I is it's very kind of linked to the ego. It's this is what I am in this world. But then, I want you to get to know me. Who's the me? It's not the I. I'm a teacher, but I want you to get to know me. And then, I need to be kind to myself. Who's the self? It's not the me. You don't say, I want to be kind to me. Oh, no, to myself. So we've got all of these pieces, and you were talking about being fractured. We've got all of these pieces going on, and we've got a lot more, because when we're small children, we get called he or she. So we have that person as well, that piece of us, and sometimes them, don't say anything to them, and so we have lots of different, but I mean, the key ones are the interesting ones, I think, are the I, me, and the self. Once we understand what it is that we're made up of, it becomes much easier to surrender to the process, because quite often the I is in conflict. And this is what you were referring to, this self-trust. The I doesn't trust the me sometimes. And it mightn't trust it myself either. I don't trust myself. We're talking about 2 distinct parts of ourselves. And I think our job is in life is to get to a point where perhaps with a bit of luck, we become one unit. Goodness knows what we can achieve when we're one unit, instead of all these fractured pieces.
Well, it's when we're one unit that we have access to creativity, to imagination. All the higher centers open up, which are the sort of the link between this world and the beyond. This is where communication occurs. And this is what's almost bitten out of us in life. Like to be automaton, to be zombie-like, to just be reactive in the world, to be fearful of expressing ourselves. It's to be flexible physically, emotionally, mentally, these are qualities which we don't see. When people get older, you see that they become more and more rigidified. Their body seize up.
Sure.
When you see a person seizing up, that is the final movement of mental and emotional rigidity. That lack of internal flexibility within our psyche finally cuts to the body. And it's sad to see that, but it's the world we're in.
Sure, absolutely. There was another thing that I wanted to add to the process, because I think when I'm looking at what we're talking about this process through life. It's a journey, isn't it? It's sometimes an interesting journey, but it's a journey. And what I found, and certainly in my own personal experience, because that's the best that I can offer. Once you understand why you chose to be here, when you understand your purpose, then the next job, I suppose, is to surrender to the purpose. And you've talked about this as kind of like giving yourself over, giving your soul permission to take the steering wheel. And this is something that I came to, and I quite how I came to it, I suppose. Well, there are a lot. There are clues left everywhere. Clues are everywhere in this lifetime, and you either see them or you don't see them, or sometimes you reflect back and you think, "Oh yes, that's what that was about." And so this idea of surrendering up, and I remember reading a book, and the woman was saying, "You won't surrender because you're scared, because you think that if you surrender, then bad things are going to happen. You're not going to have control of your life. The higher power is going to make you do something like move into a monastery or leave your family or change your job." And she said, if this higher power knows you as it does, how would it ever ask anything of you that would be bad for you? And I thought, yeah, I agree. I don't know what I need more than this higher power. So I surrendered myself to, at the time, it was the universe, because I didn't have a good relationship with God. So I just surrendered myself up, and I did it repeatedly. Every time I went out for a walk in the countryside with the dogs, I would just say, I surrender myself. And to this day, I still do it on a weekly basis. Not my will, your will. Your will be done, just as you said. Not my will, your will. Since I started doing that, miracles have happened in my life. Miracles. And I believe that's because when we're trying to go through life holding the steering wheel and forcing it, we're not going where we're supposed to be going. But when we like the Tesla, let go and say, right, okay, show me, what is my path? And suddenly miracles happen and beautiful situations happen. But above all of that, I'm blessed. I believe I'm blessed in life. But it's this inner peace that you feel, these feelings, this inner peace of, ooh, what a relief. When I surrendered, it was the biggest relief ever, that I didn't need to work hard anymore, that I could trust that the universe was going to show me, guide me, manipulate me, coerce me, push me, whatever it has to do. And I think that's where we need to get to, this surrendering.
Absolutely. When I just wanted to share something with you. You were talking about forgiveness, this course you're going to do.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting thing about forgiveness, coming back to the conversation of anger, is that you cannot forgive another if you're weak in yourself. If you are a victim, you cannot forgive. You might say the words, but it's not going to get you anywhere, because before you can forgive, you've got to release all that anger that's inside you. All that suppression has got to come to the fore. Otherwise, if you're a victim, how can you forgive someone else? You're a victim. I'm a victim. How can I forgive you? If I see myself as a victim, I can't forgive you. Not possible.
Absolutely. let me just add to that. I do this beautiful. I've got this. I was given this process by somebody else, but the process is exactly as you've described it. To be able to reach forgiveness, there's a process that you've got to do, which is to get all of the anger and the disappointment and the sadness and the frustration, everything cleared out first. And then when you're on the level playing field, then forgiveness comes. But even then, forgiveness has been sold badly. People don't understand what forgiveness is. They think forgiveness is saying it was okay. Don't worry about it. It was okay. And that's not what forgiveness is. And in the process that I do, I have to reaffirm and sell what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is, because exactly as you say, we cannot forgive anybody. We weren't given that job of forgiveness. That's for somebody else, I believe, some other being. But what we can do is we can release ourselves from that contract, that connection. So what I explain is that forgiveness is actually saying, even though what you did was absolutely unacceptable, I am choosing to forgive you because I am choosing to be free of this now. And so forgiveness sets you free. But the other person's got to live with what they've done, and they've got to sort out their stuff. That's not your business. And we don't have the power to forgive other people their sins. That's not our job. But for us, yes. And so the forgiveness is the letting go and being free. And I use this, there was a beautiful situation I saw of a woman who was in a court, and her son had been killed by a man, young son. And the man had been sent to prison for his life. And just before he was taken away, the woman said, "Please, I need to say this to this man who killed my son." And she said, "I'm telling you now that I forgive you. I forgive you for what you did, because I am not prepared to carry you on my back for the rest of my life." And she let it go. And I think that's what forgiveness is. It isn't saying it's okay. It wasn't okay. But forgiveness is letting yourself be free of it.
So with my clients, I got a phrase, which at the appropriate moment, I get them to repeat. And it goes like this: without condoning your past actions or behavior, I nevertheless completely and utterly forgive you from the bottom of my heart. And the importance there is to separate that we do not condone their behavior, their egocentric behavior.
Sure.
That's not why we forgive, and we don't forgive the personality. Is the soul within that we address out. So there's two parts to it. The first one is addressed to the ego side. I don't condone your past actions or behavior. And then see past that to the soul that is within each of us. Nevertheless, I completely and utterly forgive you from the bottom of my heart, because, and I don't add this at the time, but it becomes obvious in the session, because we recognize that it takes two to tango.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The other person, they have a soul, and their job may well have been, because they also came into this world through a whole lot of conflicting and pain and suffering, whatnot. And then maybe they are our father or our mother or a sibling, whatever. And their behavior towards us, we perceive as totally obnoxious, difficult, whatever. And it totally screws us up for the rest of our lives. And now we come back later on in life, and now we want to forgive them. Well, first of all, we have to vent all our anger. We have to put it all out on the line. And then we can see them clearly. And then we can see that they're damaged. We can see that here is a damaged person whose parents, grandparents, they themselves were all damaged, and it's gone down the line. And they couldn't have done any different. But a soul is in that body. And that soul knew that is where it had to go in relation to us. So in fact, although they were terrible and horrible and all manner of things, they were helping us to free ourselves, because they didn't free themselves.
Sure.
But simply by being who they were, they help us to free. And so that is what we forgive. We forgive the soul behind it. We acknowledge, it's not deliberate, that it's part of the learning process.
I agree entirely. And what you referred to, and I'm aware of the time, we'll probably have to come to an end soon, won't we? But what you've referred to is something which are the steps of spirituality. Because when we're forgiving somebody, this is on a very physical, material level. I'm forgiving you. And once that's done, then the steps going forward is to understand that on a macro level, everything is happening for a reason. And, we've come into this with this plan. And so, when your parents are awful to you, you've got to get rid of that trauma, and then you can rise above it and think, oh, well, I arranged this before I came here. So really it's not fair to be holding this kind of awful grudge against people. And it's like this two-step thing, which is physical and then move up to the spiritual. It's like that story that of the student who goes up to the maestro and he says, tell me, what is the Buddha? And the maestro is there and he said, the Buddha is an expression of God. Okay. And the disciple was so happy and he went away. Anyway, like a few months later, he went up to the maestro and he said, tell me, what is the Buddha? And the maestro said, there is no Buddha. The student said, hang on a minute. The last time you told me that the Buddha was the expression of God, he said, that was to stop the baby from crying. Now that the baby stopped crying, I tell you, there is no Buddha and there's no God. It's kind of, let's chunk you up to another level. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was a nice chat. Thank you.
Yeah. Sal, beautiful and lovely. I mean, I get the sense that we could probably talk forever, going from subject to subject. Yeah. And that would be lovely. But yeah, we'll keep this. I might split this up into a few because it's quite a lengthy one, isn't it? But thank you very much for sharing your time, Sal, and your wisdom and your understandings and everything that you've gleaned over the years. Very interesting.
Thank you for working with me.
Welcome. Welcome.
Right.
Okay, and we'll chat again.
I like that.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
There we are. Lovely. That was interesting. Right. We covered some ground there.
Indeed.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. As we were chatting, I was thinking, we could probably I could probably chop that into sections because there's some very clear sections in there of things.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll hang on to see how you put yours out and then I'll take yours.
Absolutely. You're more than welcome.
Channel.
You're more than welcome. Yeah.
Well, thank you for indulging me. You're
welcome. It's always a pleasure, Sal. And I like, what I like about your style is that you've got very clear ideas about how things are. And it's nice to have that kind of, sometimes we're aligned, sometimes we're slightly, in different pathways, but the general flow of it's beautiful.
All right. All right, Gordon. Well, thanks very much.
Okay.
Oh, it's a shame I couldn't have done. I meant to do this and I didn't. In Spanish, I recently wrote an article on the subject about me, self, and it's on my website. But as a result of writing the article, I found out that in Spanish, there is only sense. So there's no difference between sense and feeling.
Sentido.
Sentido. It's the only phrase. You said there was another with something else. You said also it was.
I was talking about the difference between destiny and fate. In English, we have two words, and in Spanish, there's only one. El destino. And
it's
then
the same. So it's the same with this. So sensing encompasses feeling.
Yeah.
So if you want to get to the core of the person in Spanish, you need to be more creative with words to differentiate what is, like you said, I and me. Because there is no, to know yourself, you have to be in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sensing. But we confuse sensing, which is physical, with emotional, which is experience. And then when it comes to feeling, there's no room for that, because it's all built into the sensing, whereas we're much more complex than that. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that.
Yeah. It's funny because on that verb sentir and sentirse, because there are two verbs, I teach it by saying sentir is what do you feel, and sentirse is how do you feel. So with sentir, que sientes, you have to answer with a noun, and que te sientes is you or como te sientes, you're asking for a describing word. So slightly different, which is why I suppose the sentirse, me siento, is much more popular than siento. Siento ira or siento whatever. They don't really use it that much, but it's a nice differentiation.
Well, they do say lo siento mucho. Someone's died, you say, oh, lo siento mucho.
Siento,
But they're still saying, I sense it much.
I'm feeling it. Yeah, I'm feeling it.
But it's still, but it's the same word.
The same word. It's not. Yeah.
And it's the same with Deutsch. So in Dutch, it's also. So I think it's the Latin. I think the Latin doesn't have that, and I don't know why English does, but it does. It has a separation.
Sure. Well, because quite often in English, because it came from Latin and Germanic, they brought the two words in. So that often we have two words that they're the same that come from different roots. Whereas in Latin, it was pure. It was that's the word that we use, and that's the word we use.
Right.
Yeah.
But that is the dilemma of language and human, because we're so split up, separated, and we're not in ourselves. Then we don't have the language to describe the higher part of ourselves.
Sure.
Because that's not where people are. So they in the common language, the words don't exist. This is why sensing, experiencing, and feeling, they're all one and the same in the languages, because people don't understand the difference.
Anyway. Oh well, for another conversation. But the story of the Tower of Babel was all about that, wasn't it?
Absolutely,
confusing the languages so that people couldn't communicate in the same way. Yeah. Sal, pleasure to talk to you.
Take care.
I'll talk to you again. Take care now. Bye-bye.